we had Brian Kelly on, I think, last week, and he's, of course, with the Small Business Association here in the state of Michigan, prior lieutenant governor, and he was talking about how applications or registrations for new businesses have skyrocketed throughout this pandemic, which is good news because I think people are realigning their life goals. But it's one thing to have that goal, spend the 50, 80 bucks to get it registered as an LLC with the state of Michigan, and then actually take it into a business. Bill Mayer with us now. He's the vice president for the Entrepreneurial Services out of Ann Arbor SPARK. You help people get it from that dream to a reality.
It's true. That's what we do at Ann Arbor SPARK.
What a cool job you must have.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I mean, one of the realities of being an entrepreneur is it's hard. A lot of people tell you they don't like your idea. There are too many mountains to climb, and you need to be a resilient person. And so, having done that myself multiple times, it's really nice to be in a position, and my team are a very similar makeup, to be able to assist the next generation of startups with what we do for our work. And then the other great thing about Ann Arbor and just Michigan in general is the network of mentors and advisors and serial entrepreneurs that really can add value to kind of a nascent or emerging startup.
So with that, Bill, how important is it to network with others that are kind of walking that same journey as you?
Huge. So I'll say it again just to nail this point home. Your network is your biggest asset. So whether that's investors, mentors, advisors, or just, other early stage company CEOs. In fact, we run a thing called the CEO Masterclass that brings a group of 8 to 10 current CEOs of a similar stage together so that they can, sort of share problems they're having, they can get advice in sort of a secure setting. But those connections they last. And so another example of that would be our Entrepreneurs Boot Camp, which begins next week. That we run 2 cohorts a year, and the one that starts next week the culmination will be during our A2 Tech 360 week. And so we've got 12 teams, which is the maximum number of teams that we allow, enrolled. They're all different types of companies, but they're all walking down, actually probably running down the same path together of doing customer discovery, trying to validate the market fit with their product, trying to confirm they actually have a legitimate business model that will sustain the company, and all of these things that you want to do if you're sort of shopping the idea, should I turn this into a real business? We just give a ton of support and some deadlines. Deadlines are very helpful. And, sort of take these 12 teams through together. And that network that's built off of that bootcamp experience, that stays with these entrepreneurs for the rest of their career.
So, Bill, why do you think we're seeing an increased number of people filing for LLCs to start businesses throughout the pandemic?
I'm really glad you're asking this, because this topic I find really interesting, and I feel like sometimes it gets glossed over a little bit. So, in the world of early stage, it's very easy, as you described, to set up an LLC or a C Corp. $50, register on the state's website, which is called LARA, and you're off to the races. But the issue is the survival rate of new businesses. So if we're having X number of companies file, what I'm really interested in 5 years from now, how many of those companies are still alive and are doing well? So we track, and keeping in mind Ann Arbor and Ypsilanti, roughly about 125,000 people that are living in Ann Arbor proper, and throw on Ypsilanti on top. It's not a huge community, it's a nice sized community, but we've come to learn that if we can exceed 50 new companies created in any given year, that's a really excellent year for us. So every year we track how many brand new companies are created, but also sort of past the screens that are necessary to work with Ann Arbor SPARK. And those screens are things such as, are they working on a product versus like a consulting service or a service industry business? Is there technology and innovation present? And is it scalable? And scalable means, do they have the ability to achieve $10 million of revenue or more in 5 years? So, some companies will kind of stall out at maybe the $1, $2, $3 million mark. But then you look at a company like Duo Security or LlamaSoft or, Groundspeed Analytics in Ann Arbor, that are hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue and the economic impact that has. And all those companies I just rattled off got their start in Ann Arbor and have grown and, hired the people they need in Ann Arbor. And it has a major impact on our economy. So, we also understand that in recessions, you tend to see a lot of startups born. But, a year and a half ago, I had no idea if a recession was similar to a pandemic. And so I was sweating at night, waiting to see if, this lockdown and the sort of contraction of purchasing and all of that would have a major negative impact on our startups. But some of the things we learned are, number one, I think you asked this point earlier, some people lost their day jobs.
Yeah.
And just like when Pfizer pulled out of Ann Arbor, we had a lot of displaced scientists and other PhDs. They started companies. So we did have some people that either chose to leave or lost their job and had the idea that they've always wanted to execute on. And so now's the time. The other thing we noticed is because people were working remotely, it was easier to get a hold of people. So, you need to talk to the purchasing manager or the CEO of a company. Guess what? You can get a hold of them more easily because it's during the pandemic. And then the last thing, and this, there was a lag of a couple of months for this to take effect, but there's been a longstanding tradition for investment capital that, you got to sit down in the room together, shake hands, maybe have dinner together before people feel comfortable. And that all got blown apart. So we actually had rounds close, multi-million-dollar funding rounds close in 2020 and 2021 where the people had never physically met. And so I'm very curious to see if that sticks around.
This is fascinating to me to see just what you're saying is that how many of them are going to survive, but also is it something where because so many people were on unemployment, so they had a bit of a cushion, and they had all this extra time, let's take it and build something out of that. And could that kind of be a model going forward for some of these companies to support these innovations and these dreams to say, hey, maybe we'll give you 6 months of a stipend to help develop your company?
I love that idea personally. I don't have a lot of control over the corporate decisions about granting sort of sabbaticals, but I really think it's a great idea because if you go out to either the East or West Coast, one of the things you'll find is, let's pick on Google because they have an office in Ann Arbor and Detroit, and I feel like I can pick on them. It's sort of a long-standing tradition that if there's a, talented engineer, a group of engineers or people that have a great idea and they would quit Google to go form a startup, and that's considered pretty socially acceptable. And you'd think I always try to channel the people's parents and are just like, oh my God, you're leaving this, stable job with good benefits to join a startup that's not going to pay you anything. What are you doing? But, that's a long history of entrepreneurship in the United States and the rest of the world. So these ideas that get spun out of larger companies are great. And sometimes what will happen too is there's a lot of corporate intrapreneurship programs where these companies are forever looking for innovations to stay relevant in their market. And so you'll have an idea that gets incubated inside of the company space, and then they eventually make the decision to spin it out into its new freestanding company. So we do see that as a new type of company creation ecosystem.
Bill Mayer with us here on the MegaCast. He's the Vice President for Entrepreneurial Services in Ann Arbor SPARK. And with that, Bill, if I can ask you, where do non-competes come into this industry. I mean, I come from the, media side, and we had non-competes, and a lot of times you couldn't work in the market for another year or 2 years or whatever your non-compete was. But even pizza companies and Home Depot and Lowe's, they're now implementing non-compete. So could that impact the growth of some of these startups?
Okay, so can I put the disclaimer? This is my opinion. If there are any attorneys out there, please don't email me. Okay, so non-competes are notoriously difficult to enforce. And what you're seeing is a shift in the labor market, and there's a problem with the labor market. There's been a problem for decades, but it's gotten considerably worse in terms of startup companies that can't pay as high as salaries as larger companies. It's riskier. The company could be out of business in 6 months. That's a real possibility. And so, how does a little company compete with bigger companies for talent? And so, not having things like NDAs in place, not NDAs, non-competes in place, just makes it a more attractive employment offer. The NDAs are also, something that's really problematic. A lot of times entrepreneurs will think, I have this great technology and I don't want to tell anyone what it is because they're going to steal it from me. And the exact opposite is true. You need to get up on the box and start yelling at people about it, because you need to make sure people care about what you're doing. So, kind of secrecy, non-competes, NDAs, that kind of stuff. We tell people to just kind of throw that out the window. A guy named Steve Blank once had a great quote where he's like, Mr. and Mrs. Entrepreneur, I want you to call who you perceive as your biggest competitor and dare them to steal your technology, because nobody has time for that. Like they have a million other problems. They're not going to take a raw kernel of an idea, because it's really all about the execution of that idea and building a real business on top of it. And any entrepreneurs listening will know, you're talking about like a 5 to 15 year commitment of your life that you're just going to be working crazy hours and putting your entire, energy into it. And that's not something people do lightly. I mean, occasionally it'll happen, but it's a very, very rare occurrence.
So tell us more about Spark. What are some of the big innovations coming up the pipeline?
Well, so, one of the things, first of all, Spark is an economic development group that does two fundamental things. We support large companies, so, the Lamasofts and Duo Securities that we have, and then we support small, either, pre-formation, pre-revenue tech startups, all the way up to when they have about $5 million of revenue. And so one of the things that our friends at the Michigan SBDC and the Small Business Development Center and the Michigan Economic Development Corporation did is they prioritized in 2020 technologies that were helpful to our COVID situation. And so we had different mobility companies, sort of autonomous delivery robots. So there's humanless contact. One of my favorites is we had a woman her family's from India, and the air pollution is pretty bad over there. So she developed this really slick mask called a breeze bubble that's got N95 like swappable filters in it and everything before anybody was talking about any kind of pandemic. And she, had it in market right when it hit, and it's super relevant. And so her business went through the roof by virtue of great timing. And then, just sort of all these, we have oral vaccine delivery, other types of innovations in life science and in the mobility space that, got a special source of funding because they were helping the situation. But really, we can work with any technology sector as long as they kind of meet those criteria I laid out at the beginning. Life science, advanced manufacturing, any, software, you name it, as long as it meets those criteria, we can help.
So, Bill, if I can ask you, it's been a tough year for not only companies, but also you're right there in Ann Arbor. My niece just graduated from the University of Michigan, but we know internships were so hard for these students to get, or even if they got them, they were remote, so they still didn't get the knowledge that they would have received had they been in person. Do you think that's going to kind of impact the pipeline, the talent pipeline there in Ann Arbor?
Well, let me just say thank you for asking that question. It's incredibly relevant, and something that we've been doing for the past, I don't know, 10 years, let's say, in an effort to try and retain our University of Michigan graduates in the Ann Arbor region, or at least in Michigan anyway. We can match the cost of an intern with one of our companies. We do these special student curated events. We have our larger tech track, which is part of the A2 Tech 360 week in October. But we do, things where we take groups of students around to see our tech companies. And we do this thing called the Tech Homecoming and the Startup Career Fair, all in an effort to make our students who are interested in working in technology and startups aware of what's going on, because it used to drive me crazy when I would speak to a group of students and I'd put some of our local company logos up and nobody knew any of them. I'm like, how is this possible? So that's when, the light bulb came on that we need to take action on this. And we've been doing it for about, like I said, the last 10 years in Ann Arbor, and the Michigan Economic Development Corporation noticed that, and literally within the last 2 months has made an award to SPARK to administer this brand new internship program called the MI STEM Forward program. And it will basically take what we've been doing in Ann Arbor, do a 50% match on the cost of an intern. The only trick is that job description for the intern should have relevance to STEM, which is science, technology, engineering, mathematics. So computer software, front-end designers, physicists, chemists, things like that. We can make it really easy for people to, number one, find their interns, because our database has over 1,000 interns in it right now. And we have a big campaign going where if you're a student at any college or university in Michigan, make sure your resume is in that database, because our companies are looking at that database. And the ultimate goal here is to make sure that all students in Michigan know this, and they have their information in there. All employers in Michigan have the ability to see that database, and just first mover advantage. We're going to try and keep every STEM-based graduate we can in Michigan.
I love that. And can I ask you as well, because just thinking about the recent graduates, a lot of them didn't get to take advantage of internships. Do you have to be a current student enrolled? Because we know a lot of internships do surround being, enrolled in a college program.
Well, so the reality of the situation is a lot of companies and companies use internships as a major sort of vetting mechanism for their hiring process. And so a lot of times the companies desire to take an intern, sort of when they're a rising senior, so between their junior and senior year. And at the end of their internship, a lot of times they'll have a job offer for when they graduate, if it goes well. But we can actually do the match for the interns within 12 months after they graduate. So, if somebody's just out of school, that works too.
That's great to know, because we know it's just been a crazy year for so many of these college students.
It has.
And we want them to have the same opportunities as some of the other students as well. But they're bright. Utilize the talent that is here and keep them here in Michigan.
Yeah, it's a huge issue for our companies, is finding the people they need to hire.
Bill, it's been a fascinating conversation with you. What a cool job you have.
It's pretty fun, I have to admit. I mean, you get to make the world a better place and make a direct impact on all these innovative technologies as they're emerging. So, yeah, it's excellent. And if anybody wants to learn more about any of the programs we talk to, AnnArborUSA.org is our website. Just check it out and get in touch with my team if we can help.
Thank you so much for your time and your expertise, and also cool, like you're changing the world right there in Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Exactly. Small little goal here. But we're trying our best.
There you go. Well, again, thank you for your time. We appreciate it. Again, SPARK, Ann Arbor SPARK. You can find them online.